If you're wondering how I ended up in my CEO's office with evidence that would destroy the company's star executive, it started with a text message that wasn't meant for me. 3 little words that shattered my world. We're having a baby. I still remember staring at my phone, the familiar chime of a new message cutting through the silence of my apartment. It was from Olivia Parker, Richard Thompson's secretary, a woman I had never spoken to outside of office hours. The text glowed on my screen, stark and unmistakable. The test is positive. We're having a baby. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Meet me at our spot tonight to celebrate. My stomach dropped. The message wasn't meant for me. It was meant for Richard, my boyfriend of 2 years and Olivia's married boss. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about the man I loved collapsed like a house of cards. What happened next changed everything. Not just for me, but for Richard, Olivia, and Meridian Solutions. Because when the dust settled, none of us would ever be the same again. My mother always told me not to date coworkers. "Samantha," she'd say, "office romances only lead to trouble." I should have listened to her. Richard Thompson walked into my life 3 years ago during a company mixer at Meridian Solutions. He was charming, ambitious, and had a smile that could melt glaciers. As the marketing director overseeing our biggest accounts, he commanded respect from everyone in the room, including me, a talented but overlooked graphic designer who had been with the company for 5 years. Our romance began gradually. Coffee. Meetings turned into lunch dates. Strategy sessions extended into dinners. He told me I was different, that I understood him in ways nobody else did. He claimed his marriage to Jennifer was falling apart, existing only on paper. I believed him. I believed everything. For 2 years, we maintained a careful balance. At work, we were consummate professionals. Nobody suspected a thing, or so I thought. In private, we planned a future together. Marriage. Maybe even children someday. Richard promised that once the timing was right, he would leave Jennifer and we could finally stop hiding. That Friday had started like any other. I'd been working on layouts for our newest client, a luxury watch brand that could put Meridian on the map. Richard had been in meetings all day, occasionally sending me texts about dinner plans for the weekend. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. Until 6:27 p.m., when my phone lit up with Olivia's message. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Olivia Parker had been Richard's executive assistant for less than a year. She was bright, efficient, and much younger than me, barely 25 to my 34 years. We were cordial to each other, exchanging pleasantries in the break room, but nothing more. Why would she be texting me about a pregnancy? It took exactly 16 seconds for me to understand. The message wasn't meant for me. It was meant for Richard. My Richard. I read it again, fingers trembling. The test is positive. We're having a baby. Meet me at our spot tonight to celebrate. Our spot. They had a spot. The office had emptied hours ago. I sat alone, the blue light of my computer screen casting shadows across my desk. In the stillness, I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears as reality crashed down around me. Richard wasn't just cheating on his wife with me, he was cheating on both of us with Olivia. I don't remember driving home. The next thing I knew, I was sitting on my couch, still clutching my phone, scrolling through months of messages between Richard and me. Every "I miss you" and "I love you" now read like lines from a script. Words he had probably recycled for Olivia as well. I should have been crying. I should have been screaming. Instead, I felt a strange, icy calm settling over me. The kind of clarity that only comes with complete betrayal. I opened my laptop and did something I'd never done before. I logged into Richard's email. Months ago, he had asked me to check something for him while he was in a meeting. He'd typed in his password without a second thought. Richard 2375. I'd never used it again. Until now. His inbox filled my screen. Hundreds of unread messages, calendar invites, client communications. I searched for Olivia's name. What I found made my blood run cold. It wasn't just intimate messages. It was evidence of something far worse. Richard had been funneling company resources to launch a competing agency. He'd been using Meridian's client contacts, proprietary strategies, and company funds to build his exit plan. And Olivia wasn't just his lover, she was his accomplice. As marketing director, Richard had access to everything: client lists, marketing plans, financial projections. He had been systematically copying files, redirecting potential clients, and preparing to take Meridian's biggest accounts with him when he left. In one email to Olivia, he wrote, "Once we secure the Cartwell account, we'll have enough to launch. Victoria won't know what hit her until it's too late." Victoria Hayes, our CEO, the woman who had founded Meridian from nothing 20 years ago, the woman who had personally hired Richard and trusted him completely. I sat back, my mind racing. This wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't just about a cheating boyfriend or a pregnancy announcement that had found the wrong recipient. This was about a company, my company, being gutted from the inside. I had a choice to make. I could confront Richard, let my emotions dictate my actions. I could tell Jennifer about both the affair and the baby. I could resign on Monday and try to forget I ever knew any of this. Or I could be strategic. I could protect Meridian, the place that had given me my career, my colleagues who were like family. I could ensure that Richard Thompson wouldn't hurt anyone else. Not Victoria, not the company, not me. And in that moment, sitting alone in my darkened apartment with evidence of betrayal illuminating my screen, I made my decision. Richard Thompson had underestimated me for the last time. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I methodically documented everything I found. I took screenshots, forwarded emails to my personal account, created a timeline of Richard's actions. By morning, I had compiled a damning dossier of corporate espionage and breach of contract. But I didn't act immediately. Richard had taught me one valuable lesson during our time together: patience. The right move at the wrong time was still the wrong move. So I waited, watching, gathering more evidence. Monday morning arrived, and I walked into Meridian Solutions with my head held high and a plan forming with every step. As I passed Olivia's desk, she smiled at me, the same smile she'd given me every day for months. Did she know about me and Richard? Had they laughed about it together? The thought made my skin crawl, but I smiled back, pleasant and professional as always. Richard emerged from his office, impeccably dressed in a navy suit I had helped him choose. His eyes met mine across the open office space, and he nodded slightly, our usual discreet greeting. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. Except nothing would ever be fine again. I settled at my desk and opened my calendar. The Cartwell presentation was scheduled for Friday, the account Richard was planning to steal, the account that would fund his new venture and cripple Meridian in one devastating blow. I had 4 days to act, 4 days to protect everything that mattered. As I organized my files and prepared for the morning creative meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Dinner tonight? I have news to share." News. What news would he share? That he was leaving the company? That he was finally leaving? His wife? Or perhaps that his secretary was pregnant and he needed to let me down gently? I texted back, looking forward to it. The pieces were moving into place. Richard thought he was the chess master, but he had forgotten one critical detail. In chess, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. And I was tired of being a pawn. Part 2. Strategic Response. I spent the next 3 days living a double life. By day, I was Samantha Roberts, dedicated graphic designer and secret girlfriend to Richard Thompson. I attended meetings, designed mock-ups for the Cartwell presentation, and maintained the perfect facade of normalcy. By night, I became something else entirely: an investigator, strategist, and architect of Richard's downfall. After confirming the extent of his betrayal, I needed allies. Not friends to vent to or shoulders to cry on. I needed strategic partnerships with people who could help me execute what needed to be done. My first call was to David Chen, Meridian's lead developer, and the only person in the office who had always seen through Richard's charm. David and I had worked together on countless projects over the years, building a friendship based on mutual respect and brutal honesty. "I need to meet with you," I told him over the phone Tuesday evening. "Outside the office. It's important." We met at a small cafe 3 blocks from Meridian, far enough away that we wouldn't run into colleagues. David listened without interruption as I laid out what I had discovered, his expression darkening with each detail. "I always knew Thompson was a snake," he said when I finished. "But this is another level." "I need your help," I told him. "I need access to the server logs, proof that he's been downloading confidential files." David's specialty was cybersecurity. If anyone could track Richard's digital footprints, it was him. "This could cost us both our jobs if we're wrong," he warned. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "We're not wrong," I said with absolute certainty. "And if we do nothing, we won't have jobs anyway once he steals Cartwell and jumps ship." David studied my face, searching for any hesitation. Finding none, he nodded. "I'll have something for you by tomorrow." My next step was more delicate. I needed to understand the extent of Richard and Olivia's relationship without alerting either of them to my knowledge. For this, I turned to Lisa Hernandez in Human Resources, not as a confidant, but as an unwitting source of information. "I'm putting together an employee appreciation event," I told her during a casual lunch on Wednesday. "I want to personalize some of the gifts. Do you know if Olivia has any allergies? Or any special interests I should be aware of?" Lisa was delighted to help. "She's actually been looking a bit under the weather lately. Morning sickness, I think, though she hasn't announced anything officially. Between us, I think she and her boyfriend might be expecting." I maintained my pleasant smile despite the knife twisting in my gut. "That's wonderful news. Do you know who she's dating? Maybe we could include something for both of them." Lisa leaned closer, lowering her voice. "She's very private about it. Long-term relationship, apparently, but complicated. You know how it is." I did know, all too well. By Wednesday evening, David had delivered as promised. "He's been systematically downloading client files for months," he told me, sliding a flash drive across the table at our second cafe meeting. "And there's more. He's been using the company credit card for meals, hotels, even a weekend trip to New York. All with Olivia." I plugged the drive into my laptop and scrolled through pages of evidence. Server logs, expense reports, hotel receipts. A digital trail of betrayal and corporate theft. "Does Victoria know any of this?" David asked. "Not yet," I replied, "but she will." Meanwhile, Richard continued his performance. We had dinner on Tuesday night at an intimate restaurant where no one from Meridian would see us. He was attentive, charming, full of plans for our future. Not once did he mention Olivia or a baby, or his plans to destroy the company we both worked for. "The Cartwell presentation is looking fantastic," he said, raising his glass in a toast. "Your designs are exactly what they're looking for. This account will change everything." The irony was almost painful. "Yes," I agreed, clinking my glass against his. "It certainly will." On Thursday morning, I made my riskiest move yet. While Richard was in a client meeting and Olivia was at lunch, I accessed her computer. As Richard's assistant, she had access to his calendar, emails, and files. I wasn't looking for more evidence of their affair. I had enough of that. I was looking for concrete proof of their plans to start a competing agency. I found it in a folder labeled New Horizons, their planned company name. Business plans, investor pitches, a list of Meridian clients they intended to poach, including, as I had suspected, Cartwell. I copied everything to another flash drive, my heart pounding with each passing second. Just as I was finishing, I heard footsteps approaching. I closed the folder, cleared the screen, and stood up casually as if I had simply been leaving a note on her desk. Olivia rounded the corner, a smoothie in hand. "Oh, Samantha, do you need something?" I smiled, holding up a paper mock-up. "Just wanted to leave this for Richard to review before tomorrow's presentation. How are you feeling? You look a little tired." Something flickered across her face, surprise perhaps at my concern. "I'm fine, just a bug or something." "A bug named Richard Thompson." "Take care of yourself," I said, meaning it more than she could possibly understand. "These things can really knock you down if you're not careful." Thursday night, I organized everything I had collected: the emails, the server logs, the business plans, the expense reports. I created a presentation of my own, one that Victoria Hayes would never forget. As I worked, my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Richard. "Can't wait to see the final Cartwell designs tomorrow." "Dinner after." "The presentation, we should celebrate." "You've been quiet today. Everything okay?" I responded minimally, giving nothing away. The final piece of my plan was falling into place, and I couldn't risk him suspecting anything now. Friday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I dressed with purpose, a charcoal gray suit that projected confidence and professionalism. Today wasn't about being Richard's secret girlfriend or the overlooked designer. Today was about justice. I arrived at the office early, before most of the staff. Victoria Hayes was already there, as I knew she would be. Victoria started every day at 7 a.m., reviewing reports and preparing for meetings. I knocked on her open door, presentation folder in hand. "Samantha," she said, looking up with mild surprise. "You're in early." "I need to speak with you," I said. "It's urgent and confidential." Victoria gestured to the chair across from her desk. In 15 years of building Meridian into an industry leader, she had developed an instinct for trouble. I could see it in her eyes as she studied me. She knew this wasn't about font choices or color palettes. "What is this about?" I placed the folder on her desk and met her gaze steadily. "Richard Thompson is planning to leave Meridian and start a competing agency. He's stealing clients, company information, and resources. And he's planning to take the Cartwell account with him after today's presentation." Victoria's expression didn't change, but her posture stiffened. "That's a serious accusation, Samantha. What evidence do you have?" I opened the folder. "Everything you need is right here." Part 3. The Turning Point. The Cartwell presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. By noon, Victoria Hayes had reviewed every document in my folder, called her legal team, and formulated a plan that would make my efforts look like child's play. "You've done well, Samantha," she said, her voice steady but her eyes blazing with controlled fury. "Now I need you to continue as normal. Can you do that?" I nodded. "What about the presentation?" "It will proceed exactly as planned," Victoria said, with one small adjustment. She outlined what would happen, and for the first time in days, I felt a smile, a genuine smile, form on my lips. At 1:30 p.m., the Meridian conference room began filling with people. The creative team arranged presentation boards along the wall. The account managers reviewed their notes. Richard worked the room, shaking hands and making introductions as the Cartwell executives arrived. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, my portfolio open before me, watching Richard in his element. He caught my eye at one point and winked, a private gesture between lovers. My stomach turned, but I managed a small smile in return. At precisely 1:55 p.m., Victoria Hayes entered the room. This was unusual. Victoria rarely attended initial client presentations unless they were for major accounts. Her presence caused a momentary ripple of surprise. "Victoria," Richard said, recovering quickly. "I didn't realize you'd be joining us." "I wouldn't miss this for the world, Richard," she replied smoothly. "Cartwell is exactly the kind of partnership that represents Meridian's future." If Richard was concerned by her unexpected appearance, he didn't show it. The presentation began right on schedule. For 45 minutes, I watched Richard deliver a masterful pitch. He presented marketing strategies I had helped develop, showed design concepts I had created, and outlined a vision for Cartwell's brand that would have been revolutionary, had he actually intended to implement it at Meridian. As he neared his conclusion, Victoria caught my eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. "And so," Richard was saying, "with Meridian's expertise and Cartwell's vision, we believe this partnership will redefine luxury marketing for the digital age." Polite applause filled the room. The Cartwell CEO, James Morrison, looked genuinely impressed. "Thank you, Richard," Victoria said, standing. "That was truly illuminating. Before we continue, I'd like to make a small addition to today's agenda." Richard's smile faltered slightly. "Of course." Victoria turned to face the room. "At Meridian Solutions, we believe that trust is the foundation of every successful partnership. Trust between colleagues, trust between agencies and clients, trust in the integrity of our work." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembled executives before landing squarely on Richard. "It has come to my attention that certain individuals within our organization have violated that trust in ways that are both professionally and personally reprehensible." The room went silent. Richard's expression froze, a flash of panic crossing his features before he composed himself. "Victoria, perhaps we should discuss internal matters after—" "Richard Thompson has been using Meridian's resources, client relationships, and proprietary information to establish a competing agency," Victoria continued as if he hadn't spoken. "He has misappropriated company funds, breached his contract, and betrayed the trust of everyone in this room." Murmurs broke out among the Cartwell executives. Richard's face drained of color. "These are serious accusations," he said, his voice art and completely unfounded. Victoria smiled coldly. "Are they?" She gestured toward the door, where Meridian's head of security and 2 members of the legal team now stood. "My legal team has spent the morning documenting extensive evidence of your activities. We have server logs, unauthorized expense reports, hotel receipts, and perhaps most damning, your business plan for New Horizons, which specifically targets Cartwell as your first client." The Cartwell CEO turned to Richard, his expression thunderous. "Is this true?" Richard looked cornered. "James, I can explain." "Mr. Morrison," Victoria interjected, "I want to assure you that Meridian values your business and your trust. The presentations you saw today were created by our talented team, led by Samantha Roberts, who will be taking over this account effective immediately." All eyes in the room turned to me. I straightened my shoulders and met their gazes with professional composure, even as my heart hammered in my chest. "Richard," Victoria continued, "security will escort you to your office, where you may collect your personal belongings. Your employment with Meridian Solutions is terminated, effective immediately. Our legal team will be in contact regarding the terms of your separation and the consequences of your actions." For a moment, Richard looked like he might argue. Then his eyes found mine across the conference table. In that instant, understanding washed over his features. He knew exactly who had exposed him. "You," he said softly, disbelief coloring his voice. I held his gaze without flinching. "Trust is everything, Richard. You taught me that." The security team stepped forward. With no choice remaining, Richard allowed himself to be escorted from the room, his career and his schemes collapsing around him. Victoria smoothly redirected the meeting, apologizing to the Cartwell executives for the unpleasant scene and assuring them of Meridian's commitment to their partnership. Professional that she was, she managed to salvage not only the meeting, but strengthen our position with Cartwell, who were impressed by the company's ethical stance and swift action. As the executives filed out an hour later, Victoria placed a hand on my shoulder. "My office, 15 minutes," she said quietly. I nodded, gathering my materials with trembling hands. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was beginning to fade, leaving me exhausted but resolute. As I packed up my portfolio, I noticed a commotion near the reception area. Olivia Parker was in tears, her desk being searched by security. Our eyes met briefly across the office floor. Did she know I was responsible? Could she guess that a misdirected text message had brought down their entire plan? In that moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. 15 minutes later, I sat across from Victoria Hayes, waiting for her verdict. I had exposed the company's marketing director as a fraud and a thief. I had disrupted a major client presentation. I had inserted myself into corporate politics in a way that could easily backfire. Victoria studied me carefully. "How long were you and Richard involved?" The question caught me off guard. 2 years, I admitted. She nodded, unsurprised. "And you discovered his relationship with Olivia. How?" "She sent me a text by mistake." I swallowed hard. "About her pregnancy." Victoria's expression softened slightly. "That must have been difficult." I didn't respond. What could I say? That having my heart broken had led me to uncover a plot that would have devastated the company? That personal betrayal had triggered professional vigilance? "Samantha," Victoria said after a moment, "what you did required courage and integrity. You put the company's interests above your personal feelings, and you handled a complex situation with remarkable professionalism." I hadn't expected praise. I'd been prepared for skepticism, even suspicion of my motives. "Thank you," I managed. "The Cartwell account is yours," she continued, "and I'd like you to consider taking on a larger role here at Meridian. We'll be restructuring the creative department in light of recent events, and I believe you have the vision and leadership capabilities we need. A promotion. After years of being overlooked, of watching Richard take credit for my ideas, of believing his promises that someday he would help advance my career, I was being recognized on my own merits." "I'd be honored," I said. As I left Victoria's office, I passed by Richard's now empty workspace. Security had been efficient. Not a trace of him remained. The nameplate had already been removed from his door. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Richard. "How could you do this to me? To us?" I stared at the message, a strange sense of calm settling over me. There was no us. There never had been. Not to him. I had simply been another resource to exploit, another stepping stone on his path to success. I deleted the message without responding and walked back to my desk. There was work to be done, a career to build, a future to create. One that no longer included Richard Thompson. As I settled in to prepare for my new responsibilities, my phone buzzed again. This time it was David. "Heard what happened in the Cartwell meeting. Legendary. Drink later to celebrate?" I smiled, texting back, "Absolutely." For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, not as Richard's secret girlfriend, not as the reliable but overlooked designer, but as Samantha Roberts, talented, valuable, and impossible to underestimate. Richard had taught me one final valuable lesson. Sometimes the most powerful move isn't seeking revenge, it's simply revealing the truth and letting justice take its course. Part 4. Escalation and Impact. The fallout from Richard's termination. spread through Meridian Solutions like wildfire. By Monday morning, everyone knew the basic outline. Richard Thompson, marketing director and company golden boy, had been caught stealing clients and planning to launch a competing agency. He had been fired on the spot during the Cartwell presentation, no less. What they didn't know, what only Victoria, David, and I knew, was my role in his downfall or the full extent of his betrayal. Olivia didn't return after Friday. Security had found enough evidence on her computer to justify immediate termination as well. The pregnancy text remained our secret. Victoria had agreed it was a personal matter that needn't become office gossip. I spent the weekend alternating between triumph and grief. The professional victory felt empowering, vindicating. The personal loss, not of Richard himself, but of what I had believed we shared, still ached like a fresh wound. By Monday morning, I had made peace with both feelings. I walked into Meridian with my head high, ready to step into my new role as creative director. Victoria had scheduled an all-hands meeting to address the changes. Standing before the assembled staff, she was direct and uncompromising. As many of you have heard, Richard Thompson and Olivia Parker are no longer with Meridian Solutions. Their departure was not voluntary, but necessary, due to actions that violated both company policy and basic professional ethics. She paused, surveying the room. I want to be clear, Meridian has always succeeded because of our collective talent and integrity. No single person, including myself, is more important than the principles we stand for. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Richard had been well liked, his charm and confidence inspiring loyalty among many team members. Moving forward, Samantha Roberts will be taking over as creative director, effective immediately. She has demonstrated exceptional talent, leadership, and commitment to this company's values. The Cartwell account will be under her direction, along with a restructuring of our creative teams. All eyes turned to me, standing quietly at the side of the room. The reactions were mixed: surprise, confusion, and from a few of the senior designers who had worked closely with me, genuine pleasure. Victoria continued outlining other organizational changes, but I was aware of the questioning glances, the whispered conversations. Everyone was wondering the same thing. How had quiet, dedicated Samantha Roberts suddenly leapfrogged into Richard's position? The speculation only intensified when I began implementing changes to the creative department. Richard had maintained tight control over client access, keeping designers, particularly me, away from direct client interaction. I immediately dismantled that system, creating collaborative teams that worked directly with clients from concept to completion. I also initiated a comprehensive review of all current projects, discovering that several other accounts had been targeted in Richard's exit strategy. Reclaiming these relationships became my top priority. Not everyone was pleased with the new direction. Mark Sullivan, an account manager who had been particularly close to Richard, made his displeasure known during our first departmental meeting. "With all due respect, Samantha," he said, his tone suggesting very little respect at all, "these changes are undermining systems that Richard spent years perfecting. Clients expect consistency, not revolution." The room fell silent, everyone watching to see how I would respond to this direct challenge. A week ago, I might have backed down, softened my approach to avoid conflict. Not anymore. "Mark," I replied calmly, "those systems were designed to centralize control, not to serve our clients effectively. The revolution, as you call it, is actually a return to Meridian's founding principles: collaborative creativity and transparent client relationships." I leaned forward slightly. Richard is gone. His methods are gone with him. Anyone who can't adapt to that reality is welcome to follow him out the door. Mark's face flushed, but he said nothing more. The message was clear. This was my department now, and I wouldn't be intimidated. As the weeks passed, the changes began to show results. The Cartwell campaign launched to considerable industry praise. 2 clients who had been wavering under Richard's leadership renewed their contracts with enthusiasm. The creative team, freed from Richard's micromanagement, produced some of their most innovative work in years. Not everyone adjusted, of course. Mark Sullivan resigned after our 3rd departmental meeting, taking 2 junior account managers with him. I couldn't prove they had joined Richard at whatever new venture he was building, but I suspected as much. Their departure barely registered as a concern. For every person who resisted the new direction, 3 others embraced it. David Chen stepped into a larger role, heading a new digital innovation team. Lisa from HR became a valuable ally, helping me identify and promote overlooked talent throughout the company. 6 weeks after Richard's dramatic exit, Victoria called me into her office for our scheduled review. "The board is impressed," she said without preamble. "Revenue is up 12% this quarter, employee satisfaction scores have improved, and the Cartwell campaign has attracted 3 new client inquiries." I nodded, accepting the praise but not entirely satisfied. "We still have work to do. The organizational structure needs further refinement, and we've identified some systemic issues in project management that Richard implemented." Victoria smiled slightly. "You know, when you brought me that folder of evidence, I wondered if you were motivated by personal vengeance. A woman scorned and all that." I met her gaze steadily. "It was personal," I admitted, "but not in the way you think. This company has been my professional home for 8 years. What Richard planned would have damaged Meridian irreparably. I couldn't let that happen." "And the personal betrayal?" I considered my answer carefully. It clarified things, made me see what I had been willing to overlook, professionally and personally. Victoria nodded, understanding more than I had said. "Have you heard from him?" The question surprised me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. "A few texts in the beginning. Nothing recently." What I didn't tell her was about the late-night phone call I had received 2 weeks after Richard's firing. He had been drinking, his words slurred but his anger crystal clear. "You ruined everything," he had said. "Years of planning, destroyed, because you couldn't handle a little competition, personally or professionally." "Competition implies a fair playing field," I had responded. "What you did wasn't competition. It was theft and betrayal." He had laughed bitterly. "You think you've won? You're nothing without me. I made you, Samantha. I gave you opportunities, mentored you." "You exploited me," I interrupted, "professionally and personally, and now you're facing the consequences." I had hung up then, blocking his number. Whatever closure I needed wouldn't come from Richard. "Thompson." Victoria was still watching me, a knowing look in her eyes. "Well, whatever your motivations, the results speak for themselves. The board has approved your permanent appointment as creative director, with a corresponding compensation package." She slid a folder across the desk, not unlike the one I had given her 6 weeks earlier, though the contents were decidedly more positive. "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by the validation. As I returned to my office, Richard's former office, now redecorated and reorganized to reflect my own aesthetic, I felt a sense of completion. The professional transformation was well underway. The personal healing would take longer, but I was making progress there too. I had just settled at my desk when my assistant knocked on the open door. "There's someone here to see you," she said, looking uncomfortable. "Jennifer Thompson, Richard's wife." I froze, utterly unprepared for this development. Did she say what she wants? No, just that it's personal and important. I took a deep breath. "Send her in." Jennifer Thompson was everything I wasn't. Tall, blonde, polished in a way that spoke of old money and expensive taste. I had seen her only a handful of times at company events, always from a distance, always with a mixture of guilt and curiosity. She closed the door behind her and stood for a moment, studying me with an unreadable expression. "You must be wondering why I'm here," she said finally. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Please, sit." She did, arranging herself, with practiced grace. "I won't take much of your time. I wanted to thank you in person." Of all the things I had imagined Jennifer Thompson might say to me, gratitude wasn't on the list. "Thank me?" I repeated, confused. "For exposing Richard," she clarified. "I've known about his indiscretions for some time, including you." The directness of her statement left me speechless. She knew. She had always known. "What I didn't know," Jennifer continued, "was the extent of his professional misconduct. When everything came to light, it forced a reckoning in our marriage that was long overdue." I found my voice. "I didn't do it to hurt him or you." She smiled slightly. "I know. You did it to protect the company. The personal benefits were incidental." There was something disarming about her calm assessment, her lack of anger or accusation. "Richard and I are divorcing," she said. "The proceedings have been enlightening. Apparently, I wasn't the only one he was deceiving about finances. I thought of the expense reports, the misappropriated funds, the secret accounts I had uncovered." "I'm sorry." Jennifer shook her head. "Don't be. It's liberating, actually. 20 years of marriage built on charm and lies, finally over. 20 years. The same amount of time Richard had claimed his marriage was falling apart. Another lie in a tapestry of deception." "And Olivia?" I asked, unable to help myself. Jennifer's expression hardened slightly. "The pregnancy was real. The relationship was not, at least not in the way she believed. Richard has a pattern of using women to advance his goals. You, me, Olivia. We were all means to an end." The brutal honesty of her assessment hurt, but I couldn't deny its accuracy. "Why tell me all this?" I asked. Jennifer crossed her legs, adjusting her position. Slightly. "Because I think women should look out for each other. Because you deserve to know you weren't the only one he fooled. And because I wanted to see the person who finally had the courage to do what I couldn't. Hold Richard accountable." There was respect in her voice, genuine and unexpected. In another life, under different circumstances, we might have been friends. "What will you do now?" I asked. A genuine smile transformed her face, making her look younger, lighter. "Travel. Write the book I've been putting off for 15 years. Live without constantly managing Richard's image and career." She shrugged elegantly. "Start over." As Jennifer stood to leave, she paused, reaching into her handbag. "One more thing. I thought you should have this." She placed a small flash drive on my desk. "What is it?" I asked, not reaching for it. "Everything my attorney found during discovery. Financial records, communications, business plans. Things that might be relevant to Meridian's interests." She smiled thinly. Richard kept meticulous records of his wrongdoing. It was always his fatal flaw. He documented everything because he was so certain he wouldn't get caught. I stared at the tiny device. "Why give this to me?" "Because you'll know what to do with it," Jennifer said simply. "And because I think we both deserve to close this chapter completely." After she left, I sat for a long time, staring at the flash drive. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to declare the Richard Thompson chapter of my life officially ended. Instead, I called Victoria and David to my office. "We need to see what's on this," I told them, explaining Jennifer's visit. "If there's anything that could help protect Meridian from further damage, we should know about it." Together, we reviewed the contents, a digital archive of Richard's systematic corruption and manipulation. Beyond what I had already uncovered were client lists he had planned to poach, financial irregularities dating back years, and evidence of collusion with competitors that bordered on corporate espionage. "This is worse than we thought," Victoria said grimly. "He wasn't just planning to leave and take some clients. He was actively undermining Meridian for years." David nodded, scrolling through documents. "Look at these timestamps. Some of these files go back to before Samantha even started working with him." The realization was sobering. Richard's betrayal wasn't personal, it was pathological. I had simply been one more pawn in his elaborate game. "What do we do with this?" I asked Victoria. She considered the question carefully. "We secure our clients. We implement safeguards to prevent anything like this from happening again. And we move forward, stronger and wiser." "And Richard?" David asked. Victoria's expression was resolute. "We let his own actions be his punishment. The industry is small, and word travels fast. Based on what's here, he won't find it easy to rebuild." I thought of Olivia, pregnant and unemployed, another victim of Richard's machinations. I thought of Jennifer, rebuilding her life after decades of deception. I thought of myself, forever changed by both betrayal and its aftermath. "I agree," I said quietly. "Moving forward is the best revenge." As David backed up the files and Victoria made notes for her legal team, I felt a sense of closure settling over me. Richard had underestimated me, used me, lied to me, but in doing so, he had inadvertently pushed me toward becoming someone stronger, someone who wouldn't be easily deceived again. That evening, as I prepared to leave the office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "He never told me about you. I'm sorry. Take care of Meridian. It deserves better than him. Olivia." I stared at the message, a complex mix of emotions washing over me. She had figured it out, who I was to Richard, what I had done. Part of me wanted to respond, to forge some connection with this woman who had also been deceived. But what would be the point? We were both moving on, in our separate ways. I deleted the message without replying. Some chapters were better left closed. As I gathered my things, I glanced around my office, once Richard's kingdom, now my domain. The changes I had made reflected more than just aesthetic preferences. They symbolized a fundamental shift in how things operated under my leadership. Transparency, collaboration, integrity. These weren't just corporate buzzwords anymore. They were principles I had fought for, principles that had emerged from the ashes of betrayal and deceit. I switched off the light and headed for the elevator, ready to leave the day and Richard Thompson behind me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build something authentic. And for the first time in years, I was facing the future on my own terms, unburdened by secrets and lies. Part 5. New Reality. 3 months after Richard's dramatic exit from Meridian Solutions, I barely recognized my own life. The woman who had spent years in the shadows, professionally overshadowed, personally hidden, had transformed into someone I was genuinely proud to be. Meridian was thriving under the new leadership structure. The creative department, once Richard's personal fiefdom, had become a collaborative powerhouse of innovation and client satisfaction. The Cartwell campaign had exceeded all expectations, bringing in industry recognition and attracting new business. Victoria had expanded my role to include company-wide strategic initiatives, a vote of confidence that still amazed me daily. I had moved from my cramped apartment to a light-filled loft closer to downtown, a space that reflected my emerging sense of self, open, honest, uncluttered by secrets. The walls displayed art I loved rather than generic prints chosen to please a visitor who rarely came. My bookshelf held volumes I actually read instead of impressive titles selected for show. Most importantly, I had reclaimed my voice. In meetings, in client presentations, in personal relationships. The woman who had accepted Richard's condescension and marginalization was gone, replaced by someone who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to assert it. On a crisp autumn morning, I arrived at the office early to prepare for our quarterly planning meeting. As I reviewed projections and creative briefs, my assistant knocked on the door. "The staff from Newton Media is here for the tour," she reminded me. "Victoria asked if you could join for the executive introduction." I nodded, checking my calendar. Newton Media was a small but innovative digital agency that Meridian was considering acquiring, part of our post-Richard expansion strategy. The tour had been on my schedule for weeks, though I hadn't been directly involved in the acquisition discussions. "I'll be right there," I told her, gathering my notes. In the main conference room, Victoria was already speaking with 3 people, dressed in the casual professional style of boutique agency executives. As I approached, she waved me over. "And here's our creative director, Samantha Roberts," Victoria said. "Samantha has been instrumental in Meridian's recent growth and creative renaissance." I stepped forward with a professional smile, extending my hand to the first visitor, a tall man with thoughtful eyes and a quiet confidence that immediately set him apart from Richard's performative charm. "James Newton," he said, his handshake. Firm, but not aggressive. "Founder and CEO of Newton Media. Your work on the Cartwell campaign was exceptional." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely pleased by the recognition. It was a true team effort. Victoria introduced the others, Newton's offer, CFO and their head of digital strategy, before outlining the day's agenda. "Samantha, I thought you could give James a more detailed overview of our creative process while I take Margot and Alex through the financial aspects," she suggested. "Your 10 a.m. was canceled, so you should have time." I nodded, recognizing Victoria's strategic pairing. James Newton's background was in creative direction before he founded his agency. We spoke the same professional language. As Victoria led the others away, James turned to me with genuine interest. "I'd love to hear how you transformed Meridian's creative approach so quickly. The industry has noticed the shift." I led him toward the creative department, choosing my words carefully. "We prioritized collaborative processes over hierarchical ones. Talent flourishes with the right support and recognition." For the next hour, I showed James our workflow systems, introduced him to key team members, and explained the philosophy that had replaced Richard's top-down approach. James asked insightful questions, occasionally noting similarities to his own agency's methods. "You've accomplished in months what takes most agencies years," he observed as we completed the tour. "It's impressive." "It helps when you're rebuilding rather than starting from scratch," I admitted. "The talent was always here. It just needed the right environment to thrive." He nodded thoughtfully. "Still, change management is challenging. People resist new leadership, new methods." "Some do," I acknowledged, thinking of Mark Sullivan and the others who had followed Richard out the door. "But most people want to do meaningful work in a healthy environment. If you provide that, resistance fades quickly." As we walked back toward the executive offices, James hesitated. "I hope this isn't inappropriate, but would you be interested in continuing this conversation over lunch? I have some specific questions about integrating creative teams that might be better discussed outside the official tour." I studied him for a moment, considering his request. Under normal circumstances, a business lunch to discuss potential acquisition details would be perfectly appropriate. Yet after Richard, I found myself hesitating at any hint of blurred professional boundaries. James seemed to sense my reservation. "Completely professional," he clarified. "I'm just impressed by what you've built here and would value your insights for my own team, regardless of how the acquisition discussions progress." His transparency was refreshing. "In that case, I'd be happy to," I agreed. Lunch was enlightening, not just professionally but personally. James had built Newton Media from a one-person consultancy to a respected boutique agency over 7 years. He spoke candidly about challenges, failures, and lessons learned along the way. Unlike Richard, who had always positioned himself as infallible, James embraced vulnerability as part of authentic leadership. The worst mistake I ever made was trying to be the kind of leader I thought I should be, rather than the kind I actually am, he told me over coffee after our meal. It took failing spectacularly to realize authenticity isn't just a personal virtue, it's a business strategy. The sentiment resonated deeply. I spent years trying to fit someone else's vision of success, I admitted, both professionally and personally. James nodded, understanding without pressing for details I wasn't ready to share. The irony is that our uniqueness is actually our competitive advantage, in business and in life. As we walked back to Meridian, our conversation shifted to the potential acquisition. James was refreshingly direct about his concerns and hopes for the integration. My biggest priority is protecting my team's culture, he said. They're exceptional people who have turned down higher-paying jobs at larger agencies because they value our environment. That's exactly the kind of culture Meridian is building now, I assured him. Victoria understands that creative talent thrives on respect and recognition, not fear and competition. That's evident in what you've accomplished, James agreed. 3 months ago, I wouldn't have considered this acquisition. Meridian's reputation under previous leadership was problematic. I raised an eyebrow. Problematic? James hesitated. Let's just say Richard Thompson had a reputation beyond Meridian's walls. The industry is small, and stories travel. The confirmation of Richard's wider reputation wasn't surprising, but it was validating. I had sometimes wondered if I was the only one who had seen through his carefully constructed facade. Well, Meridian is under new leadership now, I said simply. At multiple levels. James smiled. That's precisely why we're here today. Back at the office, I found Victoria waiting for my assessment of James Newton and his compatibility with Meridian's new direction. He's thoughtful, authentic, and deeply committed to his team, I told her. His creative philosophy aligns with our new approach. If the financial terms make sense, I think it would be a valuable acquisition. Victoria nodded, making notes. And personally, could you work with him? The question caught me off guard. Yes, of course. Why? She looked up, her expression kind but serious. Because if we move forward with this acquisition, I want you to oversee the integration of the creative teams. That means working closely with James for at least 6 months. The responsibility was significant, and evidence of Victoria's continuing faith in my leadership. I'd be honored to take that on. Good, Victoria said, satisfied. Because I think Newton Media is exactly the kind of strategic addition Meridian needs right now. Small enough to integrate smoothly, innovative enough to bring fresh perspective. As Victoria outlined her vision for the acquisition, I felt a familiar sense of gratitude for how dramatically my professional life had changed. 3 months ago, I had been creating designs that Richard presented as his strategic vision. Now I was helping shape the future of the entire company. That evening, as I worked late finalizing presentation boards for a new client pitch, my phone buzzed with a text from David. Drinks to celebrate your 3-month anniversary as the boss. A few of us are heading to Westlake Tavern. I smiled at the invitation. My relationship with colleagues had evolved too, from the professional distance I had maintained during the Richard years to genuine friendships built on mutual respect. Be there in 30, I replied. Westlake Tavern was buzzing with Friday evening. Energy when I arrived. David waved from a corner booth where he sat with Lisa from HR and 2 senior designers from my team. There she is, David announced as I joined them. The woman who saved Meridian from the evil empire. I laughed, sliding into the booth. I think that's a bit dramatic. Lisa shook her head. Not from where we're sitting. 3 months ago, this place was toxic. Now it's the best creative environment I've worked in. The others nodded in agreement, raising their glasses in an impromptu toast. To Samantha, David said, for showing us that good people can win. The simple sentiment touched me deeply. To all of us, I corrected, for building something worth fighting for. As conversation flowed around me, project updates, industry, gossip, weekend plans, I allowed myself to fully absorb how much had changed. Not just the professional achievements or the company culture, but my own sense of belonging and purpose. So, Lisa said, leaning closer as the others debated the merits of a new design trend, what did you think of James Newton? Victoria seemed quite impressed with him. I considered the question carefully. He's thoughtful, talented, and genuinely cares about his team. His agency would be a valuable addition to Meridian. Lisa studied me with the perceptive gaze that made her excellent at her HR role. And there's something else you're not saying. I smiled, shaking my head. That's all there is professionally, and after Richard, that's all I'm focused on. Lisa nodded, understanding completely. Fair enough, though for what it's worth, James Newton has an excellent reputation in the industry, and not just for his creative work. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. Normally, I would ignore work messages during social time, but the sender's name caught my attention. Olivia Parker. I excused myself and stepped outside to read it privately. Samantha, I debated whether to contact you, but I felt you deserved to know. Richard has been trying to launch his agency, but the industry has essentially blacklisted him. The Newton acquisition you're pursuing? They were his target before everything fell apart. I'm not sharing this out of bitterness or loyalty to Richard. We haven't spoken since I lost my job, and he's made it clear that while he'll provide financial support for our child, he has no interest in being involved otherwise. I'm sharing this because his failure feels like a form of justice for both of us. He used us both in different ways, for different purposes. But in the end, he lost everything while we have the chance to rebuild. I've accepted a position at a small agency in Seattle. Fresh start, new beginning. I wanted you to know that I harbor no ill will toward you. We were both deceived by a master manipulator. Best wishes for your continued success at Meridian. Olivia. I read the email twice, absorbing its implications. Richard was struggling. The man who had seemed invincible, whose charm and confidence had fooled so many for so long, was facing the consequences of his actions. And Newton Media, the very company Meridian was now pursuing, had apparently seen through him even before his downfall. It was a final, fitting conclusion to the Richard Thompson chapter of my life. I typed a brief reply. Olivia, thank you for sharing this. I wish you and your child all the best in Seattle. New beginnings are powerful. Samantha. Simple, sincere, and final. As I slipped my phone back into my pocket, I noticed James Newton entering the tavern with his CFO and another man I didn't recognize. They were likely celebrating the progression of the acquisition talks. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and he smiled, raising his hand in a friendly wave. I returned the gesture, feeling none of the complicated emotions that had defined my interactions with Richard. Just professional respect, and perhaps the potential for genuine friendship. I rejoined my colleagues, sliding back into the booth with a new sense of lightness. The conversation had moved on to weekend plans and an upcoming industry event. Everything okay? David asked, nodding toward my phone. Yes, I said, realizing I truly meant it. Everything is exactly as it should be. Later that night, as I walked into my new apartment, I paused to appreciate the space I had created. Open, honest, reflective of who I really was. No more hiding. No more compromising. No more accepting less than I deserved. I opened my laptop to check on a project before bed and found an email from Victoria, sent to all executives. Team, I'm pleased to announce that we have reached an agreement in principle with Newton Media for acquisition. Details will follow in our Monday meeting, but I wanted to share this milestone as we continue Meridian's transformation into an industry leader built on creativity, integrity, and collaborative excellence. Special thanks to Samantha Roberts for her instrumental role in evaluating creative compatibility and vision alignment. Victoria Hayes, CEO, Meridian Solutions. I smiled at the recognition, remembering a time when my contributions had been claimed by others, when my voice had been silenced by insecurity and manipulation. Never again. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Richard Thompson was struggling to rebuild what he had lost. Somewhere else, Olivia Parker was starting fresh in Seattle. Jennifer. Thompson was perhaps writing the first chapter of her long-delayed book. And here, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. Not defined by a relationship or by someone else's perception, but by my own strength, talent, and integrity. The journey hadn't been what I expected. The catalyst, that misdirected text message, had been painful beyond measure. But the transformation it triggered had been worth every moment of heartache. My phone buzzed with one final message for the day, from James Newton. Thank you for your insights today. Looking forward to building something remarkable together. At Meridian. Have a great weekend. Professional, respectful, direct. I typed a similar response, appreciating the clarity of our interaction. As I prepared for bed, I thought about the story that had unfolded over the past 3 months. From betrayal to redemption, from hidden relationship to authentic leadership. It wasn't the story I had planned for myself, but it was infinitely better than the one Richard had scripted for me. In the end, his secretary's misdirected text hadn't just revealed his betrayal. It had set me free, to discover my strength, to claim my voice, to build a life and career defined by truth rather than deception. Sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most powerful transformations. Sometimes what feels like an ending is actually the beginning of something far more meaningful. As I drifted toward sleep, I realized that was the true lesson of this journey. Our stories don't end with betrayal or heartbreak. They continue, evolve, transform. If we have the courage to write the next chapter ourselves. And that's exactly what I intended to do, one authentic day at a time. The morning sun filtered through my bedroom curtains, gently pulling me from sleep. 6 months had passed since that fateful text message had changed everything. 6 months of growth, challenge, and rebuilding. The integration of Newton Media into Meridian had progressed smoothly, bringing fresh talent and perspective to our expanding company. James and I had developed a productive professional partnership based on mutual respect and shared creative vision. His team had adapted quickly to Meridian's collaborative environment, in many ways enhancing the culture we had worked to establish. As I prepared for work, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed. The promotion to creative director had been just the beginning. 3 months ago, Victoria had expanded my role to Executive Vice President of Creative and Strategy, a position created specifically to leverage my vision for the company's future. My personal life had evolved as well. The woman who had accepted secrecy and compartmentalization now insisted on transparency in all relationships. I had reconnected with friends I had neglected during the Richard years, rebuilt bonds with family members, and even cautiously begun dating again, though with a newfound awareness of red flags and boundaries. As I walked into Meridian's offices, I was greeted by the energetic buzz of a thriving workplace. Teams collaborated in glass-walled meeting rooms, creatives debated concepts at standing desks, account managers engaged in animated calls with clients. The transformation from Richard's siloed, competitive environment to this vibrant community remained a daily source of pride. "Morning, boss," David called as I passed his office. Now director of digital innovation, he had flourished in the new Meridian, building a team that consistently pushed creative boundaries. "Big day," he added, with a knowing smile. I nodded, feeling a flutter of anticipation. Today, we would announce Meridian's largest client acquisition since Richard's departure. A global retail brand that had specifically cited our company's creative renaissance as their reason for choosing us over larger competitors. The win wasn't just professionally significant, it was personally validating. This client had previously worked with Richard at his former agency before Meridian, following him when he made the move. Now they were returning to Meridian under my leadership, the ultimate confirmation that we were building something exceptional. As I settled into my office, my assistant brought in coffee and my schedule for the day. "Victoria wants to see you before the all-hands announcement," she informed me. "And James Newton called. He's running late but will be here for the client presentation." I thanked her and took a moment to center myself before the day's events unfolded. On my desk sat a small crystal paperweight, a gift from the creative team on my 6-month anniversary as their leader. Etched into its surface was a simple phrase, "Truth illuminates." It had become something of a personal mantra, a reminder of the power of authenticity in both business and life. The light catching its facets seemed particularly appropriate. Today, as we prepared to announce a victory built on transparent client relationships and genuine creative excellence, Victoria was reviewing presentation materials when I entered her office. She looked up with a satisfied smile. "Ready for today?" she asked. "Absolutely," I assured her. "The team has been preparing all week. Everything is in place." Victoria nodded, setting aside her papers. "This isn't just about one client, Samantha. This is vindication of everything we've built over the past 6 months." I understood completely. Victoria had taken a significant risk in promoting me so quickly after Richard's departure, trusting my vision despite my lack of executive experience. Today's announcement was as much her victory as mine. "I've been meaning to ask," she said, her tone shifting slightly. "Have you heard anything about Richard recently?" The question surprised me. Richard's name had gradually faded from office conversations, becoming a distant memory rather than an active presence. "Nothing specific," I admitted. "Last I heard, he was struggling to launch his agency. Apparently, his reputation has made it difficult to secure clients or investors." Victoria nodded. "I received an interesting call yesterday. He's leaving the industry entirely, moving to Chicago to work for his brother-in-law's manufacturing company." The news was unexpected, but somehow fitting. Richard had always defined himself by his status in the marketing world, his influence over clients and colleagues. Leaving the industry was perhaps the ultimate admission of defeat. "Jennifer informed me," Victoria continued, "they've finalized their divorce. But she thought we should know, given his history of unpredictability." I absorbed this information, searching for any emotional response, anger, satisfaction, even pity. Instead, I felt only a calm sense of closure. "Thank you for telling me," I said simply. Victoria studied me for a moment. "You know, when all this began, I wondered if you might be consumed by what he did, if the betrayal might define your leadership. It's been remarkable to watch you move beyond it so completely." Her observation touched me deeply. It was never about him, I realized aloud. Even in the beginning, when the pain was fresh, it was about protecting Meridian, about creating something authentic. Victoria smiled. "And that's precisely why you've succeeded where he failed. He built his career on manipulation and self-interest. You've built yours on integrity and collective excellence." As I left Victoria's office to prepare for the all-hands, Meeting, I received a text from James. Just arrived. Coffee before the announcement? I met him in the small executive lounge, away from the growing excitement in the main office. Over the past 6 months, our professional relationship had developed into a friendship built on mutual respect and shared values. Nervous? He asked, handing me a latte prepared exactly as I preferred. I shook my head. Grateful, actually. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined being here, announcing this kind of win. James nodded, understanding. Life rarely follows the paths we expect. Sometimes the detours lead to better destinations. His simple philosophy resonated with my own journey. I heard something interesting this morning, I said, deciding to share Victoria's news. Richard Thompson is leaving the industry, moving to Chicago to work for family. James considered this information. Are you okay with that? The question reflected his consistent thoughtfulness. Over months of working closely together, I had shared carefully edited versions of my history with Richard, enough for James to understand the significance of this development. I am, I said, realizing the truth of my response. His choices led him where they did, just as mine led me here. It feels like the final page of that chapter. James smiled. Well, here's to new chapters, he said, raising his coffee cup, and to authentic stories worth telling. As we walked together toward the main conference room where staff was gathering for the announcement, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the unexpected journey that had brought me here. The packed room fell quiet as Victoria took the stage, welcoming everyone and acknowledging the company's transformation. When she called me forward to announce the new client acquisition, applause erupted, genuine celebration from a team that had weathered uncertainty and emerged stronger. Standing before my colleagues, I felt none of the insecurity that had once defined me. Instead, I spoke with confidence about our collective achievement, acknowledging contributions across departments and emphasizing the collaborative spirit that had secured this victory. This win belongs to all of us, I concluded. It represents everything we've built together over the past 6 months, a culture of creativity, integrity, and excellence that clients recognize and value. The room erupted in applause again, faces beaming with pride and excitement for Meridian's future. As I stepped back to let Victoria close the meeting, my gaze swept across the gathered team members, some who had weathered the Richard era with me, others who had joined during our renaissance, all part of something authentic and meaningful. Later that afternoon, as we presented our strategic vision to the new client's executive team, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the conference room glass. Confident, engaged, fully present. I barely recognized the woman who had once hidden, in Richard's shadow, accepting crumbs of recognition and affection. That evening, the executive team gathered at a restaurant to celebrate the day's success. Champagne flowed, stories were shared, and plans for Meridian's continued growth took shape amid laughter and genuine camaraderie. As conversations broke into smaller groups, James joined me at a quiet corner of the table. I have something for you, he said, sliding a small gift box across the table. A token of appreciation for your leadership in the integration process. We couldn't have done it without you. Inside the box was a beautiful fountain pen, classic and elegant. Engraved along its side were the words, "Write your own story." The thoughtful gift touched me deeply. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved by the gesture. I meant what I said earlier, James continued, his expression earnest. About new chapters and authentic stories. You've inspired a lot of people at Meridian, myself included. In that moment, I felt a flutter of something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Possibility. Not just professionally, but personally. The recognition that perhaps the most meaningful chapters of my story were still waiting to be written. We should celebrate properly, James suggested, his tone casual, but his eyes conveying something more. Dinner sometime, perhaps? The question hung between us, clearly crossing the line from professional to personal. 6 months ago, I might have hesitated, still wounded from Richard's betrayal. But the woman I had become recognized the difference between Richard's manipulation and James's genuine interest. "I'd like that," I said simply. His smile warmed his entire face. So would I. As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave, Victoria pulled me aside for a final word. "I've been thinking about our conversation this morning," she said. "About Richard and his departure from the industry." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "There's a certain poetry to it," she observed. "The man who built his career on appearances and manipulation is gone, while you, who he underestimated and betrayed, are thriving." "It's not about winning or losing," I replied, understanding now what had taken months to fully realize. "It's about being authentic and letting the consequences follow naturally." Victoria smiled, squeezing my arm affectionately. "Exactly. And that, Samantha, is why you're sitting at this table tonight while he's packing for Chicago." As I hailed a cab home, city lights reflecting off rain-slicked streets, I thought about beginnings and endings, about texts never meant to be sent, and truths never meant to be revealed. I thought about Olivia in Seattle with her new life, Jennifer, writing her long-delayed book, and even Richard starting over in Chicago, all of us transformed by a single moment of accidental truth. Most of all, I thought about the woman I had become, stronger, wiser, more authentic than I had ever been. The journey hadn't been easy, but standing on the other side, I wouldn't change a single step. The story that had begun with betrayal had become one of empowerment. The text message that had shattered my world had ultimately freed me to build a better one. As my cab pulled away from the curb, James waved goodbye, his smile promising new possibilities. I waved back, the weight of the fountain pen in my purse a tangible reminder of its engraved message. Write your own story. And that's exactly what I intended to do. 1 year later, I stood at the podium accepting the Industry Innovation Award on behalf of Meridian Solutions. The ballroom was filled with marketing executives, creative directors, and industry leaders, many of whom had once viewed Richard Thompson as a visionary, and me as merely his subordinate. "This award recognizes more than just creative excellence," I said, holding the crystal trophy that caught the light from every angle. "It celebrates the power of authentic leadership and collaborative vision. At Meridian, we've discovered that innovation thrives when every voice is valued and every contribution recognized." From my vantage point on stage, I could see Victoria Hayes beaming proudly from our company table. Beside her sat James Newton, his smile warm and encouraging as I delivered my acceptance speech. The rest of our leadership team, including David Chen and Lisa Hernandez, both recently promoted, applauded enthusiastically. Thank you to the Academy for this recognition, to Victoria Hayes for her unwavering support, and to every member of the Meridian family who made this possible, I concluded. We're just getting started. As applause filled the room, I took a moment to absorb the significance of this achievement. The award wasn't just for our groundbreaking work on the Yai global retail campaign that had put Meridian back on the map. It was recognition of our complete transformation as an agency, from the toxic, hierarchical environment Richard had cultivated to the collaborative powerhouse we had become. Later, as industry colleagues offered congratulations during the reception, I overheard snippets of conversation about Richard's failed venture in Chicago. Apparently, his brother-in-law's manufacturing company had suffered significant losses under his leadership, his manipulative management style creating the same problems that had ultimately led to his downfall at Meridian. I felt no satisfaction. At the news, only a quiet confirmation that actions eventually yield their natural consequences. My focus remained firmly on Meridian's future and my own, both brighter than I could have imagined when Olivia's misdirected text had first upended my world. James approached as the crowd thinned, champagne flutes in hand. "Congratulations, Ms. Award-winning Executive Vice President," he said, his eyes reflecting genuine pride. "Your speech was perfect." I accepted the champagne with a smile. "Thank you for everything." In the year since our first dinner together, our relationship had evolved naturally, and without the secrecy or complications that had defined my time with Richard. We had taken things slowly, both aware of the professional considerations and my need to heal from past wounds. Victoria joined us, radiant in her success as the CEO who had orchestrated Meridian's renaissance. "The industry is finally catching. Up to what I've known for a year," she said. "You two have revolutionized creative leadership." James shook his head modestly. "Samantha deserves the credit. The vision was hers from the beginning." "A vision you helped refine and execute," I reminded him, appreciating his consistent generosity in sharing recognition. Victoria watched our exchange with knowing satisfaction. She had supported our personal relationship from the beginning, recognizing that it strengthened rather than complicated our professional partnership. "The board meeting went well this morning," she informed us, lowering her voice slightly. "They've unanimously approved the expansion plans. We'll announce next week." The news sent a thrill of excitement through me. Meridian would be opening offices in Chicago and Los Angeles, establishing a national presence that would position us among the top agencies in the country. It was an ambitious move that reflected our extraordinary growth over the past year. "They've also approved your promotion," Victoria added, looking directly at me. "Chief Creative Officer, effective immediately, with full authority over all 3 locations." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. We had discussed the possibility, but I hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. "Congratulations," James said softly, squeezing my hand. "No one deserves it more." As the evening wound down, we shared a car back to my apartment. No longer the transitional loft I had moved into after Richard, but a spacious penthouse that reflected my professional success and personal evolution. James had his own place across town, though he spent most evenings with me. We valued independence alongside connection, a balance neither of us took for granted. "What are you thinking?" he asked as we gazed at the city lights from my balcony, the night air cool against our skin. "That I never saw any of this coming," I admitted. A year ago, I was devastated by a text message. Now I'm Chief Creative Officer of a national agency, accepting industry awards, building something meaningful. James nodded, understanding the weight of my reflection. Life rarely unfolds as we expect. Sometimes its greatest gifts come disguised as its cruelest blows. I leaned against his shoulder, appreciating his wisdom without the need to diminish my own journey. "I received an email today," I said after a comfortable silence. "From Olivia." His attention sharpened. Though I had shared my history with him months ago, Olivia's name rarely entered our conversations. "She's engaged," I continued, "to another creative director at her Seattle agency. She's also been promoted to head of content strategy." James absorbed this information. "How do you feel about that?" The question was typical of his emotional intelligence, direct but gentle, concerned with my experience rather than his reaction. "Happy for her," I said truthfully. "She was as much a victim of Richard's manipulation as I was. She deserves her own fresh start." "And the baby?" he asked cautiously. "A little girl, 8 months old now." I had seen photos Olivia attached to her email, a beautiful child with her mother's eyes, and, thankfully, little resemblance to Richard. She said Richard has never met her, though he sends support payments through his lawyer. James shook his head, unable to comprehend such detachment. His own relationship with his nephews and nieces revealed his natural affinity for children, something we had begun discussing tentatively in recent months. "Some men don't deserve the families they create," he said finally. I thought of Richard, isolated in Chicago, alienated from his child, his career in shambles. The man who had once seemed to control everything now controlled nothing, not even his own reputation. The truth always emerges eventually, I observed, one way or another. Later that night, as James slept peacefully beside me, I opened my laptop to review the expansion announcement Victoria had drafted. As Chief Creative Officer, I would need to guide the agency's creative vision across multiple locations, ensuring consistency while allowing for regional innovation. The responsibility was substantial, but after the past year, I felt more than capable of meeting it. Every challenge since Richard's departure had strengthened my leadership skills and confirmed my creative instincts. Victoria's mentorship had been invaluable, as had James's partnership and the support of our expanded leadership team. As I made notes on the announcement draft, an email notification appeared from Jennifer Thompson. Unlike Olivia, with whom I had maintained occasional contact, Jennifer had disappeared from my life after our single meeting in my office. Samantha, forgive the unexpected communication. I debated whether to reach out, but I felt you should know that my book will be published next month by HarperCollins. It's a memoir titled The Man I Never Knew, 20 Years with a Master Manipulator. While the names have been changed for legal reasons, it chronicles my marriage to Richard and the patterns of deception that defined it. The publisher's legal team has thoroughly reviewed the manuscript, and all claims are supported by evidence collected during our divorce proceedings. I want to assure you that while your existence is referenced as one of several women Richard manipulated, your name and identifying details have been omitted. My purpose isn't to expose victims, but to help others recognize and escape similar situations. If you'd prefer to review the sections that allude to you before publication, I would respect that request. The book isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming my narrative and perhaps helping others recognize warning signs I missed. Regardless of your response, I want you to know that writing this book has been tremendously healing. I hope you've found similar peace in your journey forward. Best regards, Jennifer Thompson. I stared at the screen, absorbing the implications of Jennifer's project. A public examination of Richard's psychology and behavior, written by the woman who had known him longest. The ultimate stripping away of his carefully constructed facade. My first instinct was caution, concern about how such a book might indirectly impact my professional reputation. But as I reread Jennifer's thoughtful message, I recognized her genuine effort to be considerate while pursuing her own healing. After careful consideration, I replied, Jennifer, thank you for your courtesy in reaching out. I appreciate your discretion regarding my identity and trust your judgment in how the broader story is told. I don't feel the need to review the manuscript. My journey has taken me far beyond those chapters, and I'm focused on writing new ones. If sharing your experience helps others avoid similar pain, that seems a worthy purpose. Congratulations on your book deal. I hope it brings not only healing, but also the professional recognition your writing deserves. Wishing you continued success, Samantha Roberts, Chief Creative Officer, Meridian Solutions. I included my new title intentionally, not as a boast, but as confirmation that life after Richard could be extraordinarily fulfilling. Jennifer had chosen the path of examining and sharing her experience. I had chosen the path of creating something new from the ashes of betrayal. Both approaches had validity. Both could lead to healing. After sending the email, I closed my laptop and turned toward James, his presence a reminder of how completely my life had transformed. The man sleeping beside me was everything Richard had pretended to be. Honest, supportive, genuinely committed to mutual growth rather than personal gain. The following Monday, I stood before Meridian's assembled staff in our main conference room, the energy palpable as Victoria introduced me in my new role. As we expand to Chicago and Los Angeles, she announced, we need leadership that embodies our core values of creativity, integrity, and collaborative excellence. Samantha Roberts has not only transformed our creative approach, but has redefined what leadership looks like at Meridian. As Chief Creative Officer, she will guide our creative vision across all locations, ensuring we maintain the distinctive approach that has fueled our extraordinary growth. The applause was genuine, the faces before me reflecting true appreciation, rather than the wary compliance that had characterized the Richard era. Even those who had initially resisted the changes I implemented had eventually recognized the benefits of our new culture. "Thank you, Victoria," I began, surveying the room filled with colleagues who had become a professional family. "When I joined Meridian 8 years ago, I could never have imagined standing here today. But that's the beauty of creative work. It constantly surprises us, challenges us, and reveals possibilities we never considered." I outlined my vision for Meridian's creative future, a bold approach that balanced innovation with strategic discipline, pushing boundaries while delivering measurable results for clients. "As we expand nationally, we'll face new challenges and opportunities," I acknowledged. "Different markets, different talents, different perspectives. Our strength will be in embracing that diversity while maintaining our core commitment to authentic creativity and collaborative excellence." After the announcement, David caught up with me in the hallway, his expression a mix of pride and nostalgia. "Remember when you first came to me with that folder of evidence about Richard?" he asked. "Who would have thought we'd end up here?" I smiled at the memory of those uncertain days, the risk we had taken together, the trust we had built in the process. "You believed in me when it mattered most," I reminded him. "I won't forget that." "I just recognized the truth when I saw it," he said simply. "Speaking of which, have you told James about Chicago yet?" The question referenced our most recent private conversation about the possibility of James relocating temporarily to launch our Chicago office. His background in digital innovation made him the ideal candidate to establish Meridian's presence in the competitive Midwest market. "Not yet," I admitted. "We're discussing it tonight." David nodded, understanding the personal implications. "Long distance is tough, but if anyone can make it work, it's you two." That evening, James and I sat at our favorite restaurant, celebrating my promotion while addressing the practical challenges it presented. The Chicago expansion created a professional opportunity for him, but potential complications for us. 3 months on site would be the minimum, I explained, outlining the timeline Victoria and I had discussed. After that, we could reevaluate based on how the office is developing. James considered this thoughtfully, without immediate resistance or acceptance. "I'd want to come back at least every other weekend," he said finally. "And you would visit Chicago when your schedule allows?" "Absolutely," I agreed, relieved by his pragmatic approach. "It's not ideal, but it's temporary. And professionally, it's an extraordinary opportunity for you to shape an office from the ground up." He reached across the table, taking my hand. "We've built something special, Samantha. 3 months apart won't change that." His confidence warmed me, a reminder of how different this relationship was from my time with Richard. No manipulation, no hidden agendas, no power imbalances. Just 2 successful professionals supporting each other's growth while nurturing their connection. "There's something else I've been considering," James said, his expression turning more serious. "Something longer term." My heart quickened, uncertain where the conversation was heading. "The lease on my apartment ends next month," he continued. "It seems increasingly impractical to maintain 2 residences when I spend nearly every night here." I smiled, understanding his direction. "Are you proposing we move in together?" "I'm proposing we talk about it," he clarified. "It's a significant step, and I want us both to be certain." His caution reflected his respect for my past experiences, his understanding that after Richard's deceptions, I valued clarity and careful consideration in relationship milestones. "I'd like that," I said simply. "When you come back from Chicago, let's make it official." His smile illuminated his entire face. Then I have extra motivation to ensure the Chicago office succeeds quickly. As we discussed logistics, which furniture to keep, how to combine our book collections, whether his home office setup would fit in my spare room, I marveled at the ordinary miracle of planning a future with someone trustworthy. After years of secret meetings and compartmentalized existence with Richard, the transparency of this relationship felt like a luxury. The following week brought Jennifer Thompson's book announcement, generating significant industry buzz. The publisher's press release described it as an insider's account of deception and manipulation at the highest levels of the marketing world, with early reviews praising its unflinching examination of psychological control in professional and personal relationships. Victoria called me into her office the morning the news broke, her expression concerned. "Have you seen this?" she asked, turning her computer screen to show the announcement. "Jennifer contacted me last week. I assured her. She's been discreet about my involvement and changed names throughout. Meridian isn't mentioned at all." Victoria nodded, relieved but still cautious. "It's bound to create speculation, especially given Richard's prominence in the industry before his downfall. Are you prepared for that?" The question reflected her consistent concern for my well-being alongside her responsibility as CEO. "I am," I said confidently. "Anyone who matters already knows the essential truth. The details are irrelevant now." She studied me for a moment, satisfaction evident in her expression. "You've come extraordinary distance, Samantha. From the woman who brought me that evidence folder to the leader sitting before me now, it's been remarkable to witness." "I had excellent guidance," I acknowledged, grateful for her mentorship through the turbulent transition. "You had inner strength," she corrected. "I just provided opportunities for it to emerge." Later that day, as I reviewed creative briefs for the Chicago office launch, my assistant informed me of an unexpected visitor. "A Ms. Parker is asking to see you," she said, clearly uncertain about the protocol. "She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important. Olivia Parker, here in Boston, at Meridian's offices." The surprise momentarily left me speechless. "She has a baby with her," my assistant added when I didn't immediately respond. The additional detail decided me. "Please show her in," I said, quickly clearing my desk of confidential materials. Moments later, Olivia entered, looking both nervous and determined. In her arms was a beautiful little girl with wide, curious eyes and delicate features. The child Richard had never met, the innocent result of his calculated deception. "Samantha," Olivia said, her voice steady despite her evident discomfort. "Thank you for seeing me. I should have called first, but I wasn't sure you'd agree." I gestured to the visitor chairs. "Please sit. This is unexpected but not unwelcome." She settled into a chair, adjusting her daughter on her lap. The child stared at me with solemn interest, clutching a small stuffed elephant. "This is Emma," Olivia said, smoothing the baby's dark curls. "Emma, this is Mommy's friend Samantha." Friend. The term seemed both inadequate and overly familiar for our complicated connection, yet I appreciated the gesture toward normalcy. "She's beautiful," I said truthfully. Olivia nodded, maternal pride momentarily overriding her nervousness. "She's the best thing that came from everything." The unspoken reference to Richard hung between us, neither of us willing to invoke his name directly. "I'm in Boston for my fiancé's industry conference," Olivia explained. "When I realized how close we were to Meridian, I felt I should see you in person, to thank you." The statement caught me off guard. "Thank me? For what?" "For not hating me," she said simply. "For recognizing that I was as deceived as you were. For your email when I told you about my engagement. Most women wouldn't have been so gracious." I considered her words, recognizing the courage it had taken to come here, to face me directly with her child, Richard's child, in her arms. Hatred. Requires energy I'd rather invest elsewhere, I said finally. We were both manipulated by someone skilled at creating illusions. The only productive response was to move forward. Olivia nodded, relief evident in her expression. I've been doing that. The promotion I mentioned in my email, my engagement to Ben, he knows everything about my past, about Emma's father. He's been incredible. I'm glad, I said sincerely. Everyone deserves a chance at authentic happiness. She glanced around my office, taking in the evidence of my own professional success, the industry award displayed on a shelf, the framed announcement of my promotion, the mock-ups for Meridian's Chicago office. You've done well, she observed. Really well. I'm not surprised. Even when we barely knew each other, I could see how talented you were. The genuine admiration in her voice touched me unexpectedly. Thank you. It's been an extraordinary year. I saw the announcement about Jennifer's book, Olivia said after a brief silence. Will that be difficult for you? I appreciated her direct approach. No evasion, no pretense. No. That chapter of my life is closed. Whatever Jennifer needs to process her experience is her business. Olivia adjusted Emma on her lap as the child began to fidget. I considered contacting her, you know, when I first learned how long she had been married to him. I thought maybe I owed her some kind of apology or explanation. Did you? I asked, genuinely curious. She shook her head. Ben advised against it. He said she deserves to move forward without reminders of people connected. To her pain, I think he was right. Her fiancé's wisdom impressed me. His understanding that sometimes the kindest action is allowing someone to heal without reopening wounds. He sounds insightful. He is, Olivia confirmed, a soft smile transforming her features. After experiencing manipulation disguised as affection, genuine love feels almost disorienting at first, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. The observation resonated deeply with my own experience in the early days with James. I understand. Completely. Our eyes met in mutual recognition. Two women who had traveled similar paths from deception to authenticity, from manipulation to genuine connection. Emma chose that moment to drop her stuffed elephant, breaking the emotional weight of our exchange. As I retrieved it from the floor, the child rewarded me with a dazzling smile that momentarily took my breath away. She had Olivia's expressions, but something in her features, perhaps the shape of her eyes or the curve of her smile, echoed Richard in ways that stirred complex emotions. She's his only child, you know, Olivia said quietly, following my thoughts, with uncanny accuracy. Jennifer told me they never had children. And from what I understand, there weren't others like us. Just you and me. The information surprised me. The realization that despite his serial deception, Richard had maintained some boundaries in his manipulation. It didn't excuse anything, but it added a layer of understanding to the complex portrait of the man who had wounded us both. Does that matter to you? I asked. Olivia considered the question seriously. It matters for Emma, she said finally. Someday she'll have questions about her father. I'll tell her the truth, but I want that truth to be as simple as possible. He made bad choices. He wasn't ready to be a father, but he ensures she's provided for. Not a complete picture, but enough for a child to understand. Her thoughtfulness about her daughter's future emotional needs impressed me. You're a good mother, Olivia. She blinked rapidly, unexpectedly moved by the simple acknowledgement. I'm trying to give her what I didn't have: stability, honesty, clear boundaries. As Emma began to fuss, indicating the limits of her patience for adult conversation, Olivia stood to leave. We should get back to the hotel. Ben will be wondering where we are. I rose as well, walking them to the door. I'm glad you came, Olivia. Truly. She hesitated at the threshold, then spoke with quiet sincerity. We can't change what happened, but I find comfort in knowing we both created something positive from it. You with Meridian, me with Emma, and my new life in Seattle. The best revenge is living well, I suggested with a small smile. Not revenge, she corrected gently. Reclamation. Of our stories, our worth, our futures. The distinction felt important, a shift from focusing on Richard's downfall to celebrating our respective resurrections. Reclamation, I agreed. I like that. After they left, I stood at my office window, watching as Olivia emerged onto the street below, Emma secure in her arms. Their visit had unexpectedly provided another kind of closure, not through confrontation or blame, but through mutual recognition of shared experience and divergent healing paths. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Dinner plans confirmed. Have news about Chicago timeline. Miss you. I smiled at the simple message, the uncomplicated affection it represented. After years of complexity with Richard, the straightforward nature of my relationship with James still felt like a gift, one I never took for granted. As I returned to reviewing creative briefs for the Chicago launch, I reflected on Olivia's parting words. Reclamation, not revenge. The phrase captured perfectly what the past year had been about. Not defining myself in opposition to Richard's betrayal, but reclaiming my narrative on my own terms. Chief Creative Officer, respected industry leader, woman who had transformed, professional catastrophe into unprecedented success, partner in a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine affection. These were the identities I had reclaimed and created, far more significant than Richard Thompson's former girlfriend, or woman who exposed corporate espionage. That evening, as James and I discussed his accelerated timeline for the Chicago office, 2 months instead of 3, with a clear exit strategy, I felt a profound gratitude for the unexpected journey that had led me here. The misdirected text that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning, opening doors I might never have found otherwise. You're quiet tonight, James observed as we walked home through the illuminated city streets. Everything okay? I squeezed his hand, appreciating his intuitive awareness of my mood. Better than okay, I assured him. I had an unusual visitor today, Olivia Parker and her daughter. His eyebrows rose in surprise. That must have been intense. Actually, it was surprisingly healing, I admitted. Seeing her build a good life, seeing Richard's daughter being raised by someone who values honesty and clarity, it felt like the final piece falling into place. James nodded, understanding without judgment. Closure comes in unexpected forms sometimes. It's not even about closure, I realized aloud. It's about perspective. Seeing how completely life has moved on for all of us. Olivia with her family, in Seattle, Jennifer with her book, me with Meridian and with you. Richard is just a character in our past now, not a defining force in our present. James smiled, pulling me closer as we walked. That's the thing about manipulators, he observed. Their power exists only as long as we allow it to. Once we reclaim our narratives, they become footnotes rather than chapter titles. His insight resonated with what Olivia had said about reclamation. Exactly. As we reached my building, soon to be our building, James paused, turning to face me under the soft glow of the street lamp. I've been thinking, he said, his expression suddenly serious. About Chicago, about the future, about us. Something in his tone made my heart beat faster. What about us? I don't want to leave for Chicago without making my intentions clear, he continued. These past months have shown me exactly what I want for my future. Who I want in my future. I held my breath, sensing the significance of the moment. I'm not proposing tonight, he clarified with a gentle smile. That deserves its own special moment when we're both ready. But I want you to know that's where I see us heading, toward building a life together, a family if that's what you want, a partnership in every sense. The simple honesty of his declaration touched me deeply. No grand gestures, no manipulative timing, just authentic sharing of his feelings and intentions. "I want that too," I said softly. "All of it." His smile illuminated his entire face as he pulled me close. Then Chicago is just a brief intermission in a much longer story. As we entered the building together, planning our future with the easy confidence of two people who had found their way to authentic connection, I thought again of Olivia's word: reclamation. We had all reclaimed our narratives from Richard's destructive influence, Olivia through motherhood and new love, Jennifer through writing her truth, me through professional excellence and genuine partnership. The text message that had once shattered my world had ultimately led me to rebuild it, stronger and more authentic than before. The betrayal that had seemed like an ending had become the catalyst for an unexpected beginning. And the woman who had once defined herself through someone else's eyes now stood firmly in her own power, writing her own story one truthful page at a time. 5 years had passed since that life-changing text message. The grand ballroom of the Wilshire Hotel sparkled, with elegant decorations as industry leaders gathered for the annual Marketing Excellence Awards. I smoothed the fabric of my midnight blue gown, feeling a flutter of anticipation as the presenter approached the podium. And the Agency of the Year award goes to Meridian Solutions. The room erupted in applause as Victoria Hayes squeezed my hand. We made our way to the stage together, she as the outgoing CEO who had built Meridian's foundation, and I as her recently announced successor who would lead it into the future. "This award belongs to everyone at Meridian," Victoria said into the microphone, her voice strong and clear. "To our talented teams across Boston, Chicago, and Los Angeles. To our loyal clients who trust us with their vision. And especially," she paused, turning toward me, "to Samantha Roberts, whose extraordinary leadership has transformed Meridian into the industry powerhouse it is today." She stepped back, gesturing for me to take the podium. The spotlight felt warm on my face as I surveyed the audience, competitors, colleagues, and friends who had witnessed Meridian's remarkable evolution. 5 years ago, Meridian stood at a crossroads, I began, careful not to glance toward the table where Richard Thompson sat with his new agency colleagues. "We chose a path defined by collaborative creativity, transparent client relationships, and authentic leadership. This award affirms that choice and reminds us that genuine excellence can never be built on deception or manipulation." My eyes found James in the audience, his proud smile more meaningful than any industry recognition. Our second wedding anniversary was approaching, a milestone that once seemed impossible during those dark days of betrayal and discovery. After the ceremony, we navigated through congratulatory conversations and celebratory champagne toasts. I caught glimpses of Richard across the room, noticeably subdued compared to his former commanding presence. He had eventually secured the creative director position at Pearson & Bell, rebuilding a career that would never quite reach its former heights, but provided stability and purpose. "Congratulations, Samantha." The voice behind me was familiar, though rarely heard now. I turned to find Richard standing there, a respectful distance between us. "Meridian deserves the recognition." "Thank you, Richard," I replied evenly, my emotions long since settled into calm neutrality. "How are things at Pearson & Bell?" "Steady," he said with a slight nod. "Nothing like Meridian's trajectory, but solid. I've learned to appreciate stability." Something in his expression suggested genuine reflection, the hard-earned wisdom that comes only through consequence and accountability. "I saw Olivia last month," he continued, his voice quieter. "Emma is starting kindergarten in the fall." I nodded, aware through occasional emails from Olivia that Richard had maintained supervised visits with his daughter for nearly 2 years now. "She's a wonderful child. Olivia and Ben have created a beautiful family." "They have," Richard acknowledged. surprising me with his sincerity. Better than anything I could have provided at that point in my life. Before I could respond, James appeared at my side, his hand resting lightly at the small of my back. "Richard," he greeted him with professional courtesy. "Congratulations on your financial services campaign. The industry panel spoke highly of it." Richard accepted the compliment with a brief nod. "Nothing compared to Meridian's work, but I appreciate that." He glanced between us, something like resignation in his expression. "I should let you get back to your celebration. Congratulations." "Again, Samantha, it's well-deserved." As he walked away, James studied my expression. "You okay?" I slipped my arm through his, leaning slightly against his steady presence. "Completely. It's strange. I used to imagine confronting him would feel vindicating or cathartic. But seeing him now just feels neutral, like encountering a former colleague, nothing more." James smiled, understanding as always. "That's the truest form of healing, when someone who once held such power over your emotions becomes simply another person." We made our way through the elegant ballroom toward Victoria, who was deep in conversation with the CEO of our largest client. As Meridian's announced successor, I was already handling many of her responsibilities, preparing for the formal transition in 6 months. "I just had the most interesting conversation with Jennifer Thompson," Victoria mentioned when we joined. Her second book is being adapted for a limited series. Apparently, several networks were interested. Jennifer's first book had become required reading in business ethics programs across the country. Her follow-up, focused on rebuilding professional identity after manipulation, had resonated even more widely. "She's created something meaningful from difficult experience," I observed. "We all have, in different ways." Victoria nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That might be the most valuable lesson from everything that happened. Pain can be transformed into purpose when we refuse to be defined by betrayal." Later that evening, as James and I returned to our brownstone, I slipped off my heels with a contented sigh. The house reflected our shared aesthetic, warm, honest, uncluttered by pretense. James loosened his tie as we settled in our living room, the lights of Boston visible through wide windows. "Quite a night," he observed, pouring us each a glass of wine. Agency of the Year, conversation with Richard, Jennifer's book adaptation, all threads of the same story. I accepted the wine, considering his observation. A story I never would have chosen, but wouldn't change now. Everything valuable in my life emerged from that moment of painful clarity. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia, a simple, congratulatory message with a photo attached of Emma holding a handmade card that read, "Congrats, Ms. Samantha," in wobbly kindergarten letters. The child who connected us all through complicated circumstances had become a bright spot of innocent joy. "She's gotten so big," James commented, looking over my shoulder at the photo. Olivia mentioned she's starting piano lessons. I nodded, smiling at the evidence of normal childhood milestones proceeding despite the unusual circumstances of Emma's family structure. She's apparently quite musical, takes after her mother. As I responded to Olivia's message, I reflected on the unlikely friendship that had developed between us, two women connected by betrayal who had refused to let that connection remain negative. We spoke occasionally, exchanged holiday cards, and maintained a gentle awareness of each other's lives without dwelling on the past that had linked us. "Victoria seemed pleased with how you handled the acquisition questions at the press conference," James noted, changing the subject to professional matters. "The media has been speculating about Meridian's expansion plans since the award was announced." I set down my phone, turning my attention to the future rather than the past. "The Frankfurt office is our priority for next year. The European market is ready for Meridian's approach, and we've already identified potential leadership." James nodded approval. "The London team has laid excellent groundwork. Their collaborative model mirrors what we've built here. We discussed business strategy late into the evening, the natural conversation of partners who respected each other's professional expertise while nurturing their personal connection. No power struggles, no hidden agendas, no manipulation disguised as support. The next morning, I woke early and slipped out of bed without disturbing James. Our home office overlooked the garden, now blooming with spring flowers we had planted. Together. I opened my laptop to review notes for Monday's executive meeting, my first as announced CEO-elect. An email notification appeared from an unfamiliar address, the subject line catching my attention. Thank you, R. Thompson. I hesitated briefly before opening it. Samantha, seeing you accept that award last night, I was struck by the stark contrast between your path and mine over these past 5 years. You've achieved everything I once pursued through manipulation and deception, while I'm slowly rebuilding a career that will never reach those heights. This isn't written in search of sympathy or forgiveness. Rather, it's an acknowledgement of truth that's taken me years to fully accept. My methods failed not just ethically, but practically. Your approach, building through integrity rather than exploitation, proved exponentially more effective. Jennifer's books exposed patterns I couldn't recognize in myself until consequences forced that recognition. Olivia's boundaries taught me that genuine connection requires respect rather than control. Your success demonstrated that manipulation ultimately undermines the very goals it seeks to achieve. These are lessons I wish I'd learned differently. Emma deserved a father capable of authentic love from the beginning. Jennifer deserved a husband who valued partnership over possession. You deserved a colleague and partner who recognized your talents rather than exploiting them. I can't undo those failings, but I can acknowledge them honestly. The text message that exposed my deception ultimately freed all of us. You toward unprecedented success, Jennifer toward meaningful advocacy, Olivia toward authentic family, and me toward painful but necessary self-confrontation. Congratulations on all you've built at Meridian. It was always capable of greatness, but needed leadership defined by truth rather than manipulation to achieve it. Richard, I sat with the email for several moments, absorbing its unexpected honesty. There was no request for response, no subtle manipulation, just an acknowledgement of reality that suggested genuine, if belated, self-awareness. James found me still at my desk, contemplative but not disturbed. "Everything okay?" he asked, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. I showed him the email, watching as he read it carefully. "Remarkable," he observed finally. "Actual accountability, without excuses." 5 years is a long time for reflection, I noted. Losing everything he valued probably accelerated the process. James studied me with the quiet attentiveness that had been healing from the beginning of our relationship. "Will you respond?" I considered the question thoughtfully. "I don't think so. The acknowledgement itself is sufficient closure. Anything more might suggest a connection that no longer exists." He nodded, understanding. "Clean boundaries. You've always been good at those." "I had to learn them the hard way," I reminded him with a small smile. "But yes, I've come to value clarity above almost everything else." Later that day, as we prepared for dinner with friends, I noticed my engagement and wedding rings catching the light, symbols of commitment built on honesty rather than deception, on mutual respect rather than manipulation. "You seem contemplative," James observed as we walked toward the restaurant. "Richard's email?" "Partly," I admitted, "but more about the journey itself. How one moment of painful truth created the opening for everything meaningful in my life. Now." James squeezed my hand gently. "The universe has strange methods sometimes." "Indeed," I agreed. "A misdirected text message seems like such a small thing to transform multiple lives so completely." "Not the message itself," James corrected thoughtfully, "but what you chose to do with the truth it revealed. You could have confronted Richard, emotionally could have walked away completely, could have sought simple revenge. Instead, you chose protection over destruction, creation over retaliation. His observation resonated deeply. We all did, in different ways. Jennifer chose understanding over bitterness. Olivia chose healthy boundaries over resentment. Even Richard eventually chose accountability over denial. As we reached the restaurant where friends waited to celebrate Meridian's award, I felt a profound sense of completion. The story that had begun with betrayal had evolved through healing into something altogether different, not defined by Richard's actions but by our collective responses to them. The woman who had once lived in the shadows of someone else's manipulation now stood firmly in her own light, guided by her own values, creating a legacy of authentic leadership and genuine connection. The text message that had once shattered my world had ultimately freed me to build one far stronger and more meaningful than I could have imagined. The betrayal that had broken my heart had created space for true love to enter. The professional setback had opened the path to unprecedented success, not despite the painful beginning, but because of it. Not in opposition to Richard's influence, but beyond it entirely. Not defined by victimhood, but by the empowered choices that followed revelation. As I stepped into the warm embrace of celebration with people who knew and valued the authentic me, I carried a quiet gratitude for the unexpected journey, with all its pain and promise, its devastation and discovery, its endings and beginnings. The misdirected text had revealed a painful truth, but the most powerful truth was what had emerged in its aftermath. That betrayal need not define us, that manipulation cannot prevail against integrity, and that our greatest strength lies not in avoiding painful revelations, but in how we rebuild after they occur. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.